never imagined my own parents would one day look me in the eye and tell me my children weren't welcome in their home. Yet there I was, standing in my kitchen, staring at my phone, frozen by a photo that told me everything without saying a word. It came through while I was packing school lunches. Peanut butter knife in one hand, baby carrots in the other. A chime, then a preview on my lock screen. Family dinner last night. I didn't think twice before tapping it open. Probably something from my cousin Rachel. She loved to overshare photos of her dogs in sweaters and food spreads with ironic captions. But it wasn't Rachel. It was my brother, Jeremy. And it wasn't just any dinner. There they were, my parents, seated at the head of their long oak table, the same one I'd eaten around since I was 7. My brother and his wife, Erica, flanking them, laughing with forks raised. Their 2 kids, cheeks rosy, caught mid-giggle. Even Uncle Glenn made the frame somehow, tipping back a glass of wine. It was a celebration. Plates of roast chicken, mashed sweet potatoes, cranberry compote. The fancy linens were out, the candlesticks too, the kind of dinner that required planning, coordination, an invitation list. I looked at every face twice, scanned every corner like some deranged Where's Waldo. And when it hit me that there was no trace of me or my son, not even an empty chair set for us, something in my chest cracked. Not shattered, cracked. A quiet, clean break. They didn't forget. They excluded us. I didn't cry right away. Instead, I just stood there, knife still in hand, jelly spreading too far on my son's sandwich. My breathing went shallow. The air in the kitchen turned heavy. I pressed the photo and zoomed in. There, on the mantel, was the new fall garland I helped Mom pick out last year. She had me searching 5 different home stores for just the right mix of pumpkins and eucalyptus. Now it sat right there behind Erica's head. They'd cleaned the house, they'd cooked, they'd laughed and clinked glasses, all while knowing I was home, 15 minutes away, none the wiser. My son came bounding in from the hallway, holding his school shoes like trophies. "Mama, can you help with the laces?" I blinked out of the freeze. "Of course, sweetheart," I said, kneeling beside him. My fingers moved slowly over the knots, but inside my head, the questions were already screaming. Why didn't they invite us? What did I do wrong this time? And the loudest one of all, what kind of family turns its back on its own? I sent him off with a hug that lasted just a second too long, then returned to the kitchen. My coffee had gone cold. My hands had started to shake, not with rage, not even sadness, with something colder. Recognition. This wasn't the first time they'd made me feel small, but it was the first time I saw it clearly. And I knew this wasn't just about a forgotten dinner. This was something deeper, and I wasn't going to let it stay buried. I tried to wait, tried to be rational, to not let the cold knot in my chest push me into something impulsive. But by noon, I gave in and tapped her name on my phone. "Mom." She picked up after 3 rings, cheerful as ever. "Well, look who remembered I exist," she joked. I swallowed. "Hi, Mom." She launched right in, asked about the weather, the neighborhood construction, whether Ben still had that cough from last week. I let her talk for a bit. Waited for her to mention it herself, but she never did. So finally, I said it. Quietly. "I saw the photos from last night." A pause, not long enough for surprise, just long enough for calculation. "Oh," she said lightly, "you mean dinner?" "MMHMM. Looked like a whole event." She laughed. "It was just a simple thing, Laura. Your dad wanted roast chicken. Jeremy brought a pie. Erica always insists on doing too much with the place settings. You know how she is." "Right," I said, keeping my voice even. You know, Ben and I would have loved to come. Silence. Then she exhaled, in that airy way she always does when she wants to move past something uncomfortable. Well, honey, I just assumed you were busy. You always have your projects, your book deadlines. I didn't want to bother you. Not I forgot, not it slipped my mind, just I didn't want to bother you. The words landed like a stone in water, deceptively light, then sinking fast and deep. I forced a smile into my voice. You usually check. Another pause. I could almost hear her glance away from the phone, as if looking for a way out of the conversation. Well, we've just gotten used to you doing your own thing, that's all, she said. You've always been independent. You don't always make time for family dinners, and I thought maybe it was better not to pressure you. Better for who? I wanted to ask. But I didn't. Instead, I looked down at the floor where Ben's sneakers were still tossed from this morning, one upside down, his backpack half-zipped, a corner of his comic book peeking out. He'd been asking when we'd see Grandpa again, and I had no answer. I wasn't too busy, I said finally, quieter than I meant to. I would have made time. There was no apology, no backpedaling, just her usual deflection. Well, we'll plan something soon, she said. Maybe a Sunday lunch? Jeremy's boys have soccer, but we can squeeze something in. I nodded slowly, even though she couldn't see me. Sure, Mom. Let me know. We said our goodbyes. The call ended, and I just sat there, staring at the same phone that had lit up that morning, with a photo of a family I used to think I was a part of. It wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't scheduling. It was choice. They chose not to include us. And I felt it. Not like a sharp stab, but like something more insidious. A quiet erosion. As if a piece of my place had been chipped away so slowly over the years, I hadn't even noticed until it was just gone. I was rinsing the dinner dishes when Ben patted in, dragging his socked feet across the kitchen tile, his tablet hugged against his chest. His brows were furrowed in that way he does when he's building up to something. I could tell he'd been carrying it around all day. Mom, he said, not looking up, can I ask you something without you getting mad? That alone made me turn from the sink. Of course, baby, what's going on? He hesitated, staring at a crack in the tile like it might swallow him whole. Then he looked up, and the question came out in a quiet voice that had no business living in the throat of an 8-year-old. Why doesn't Grandpa love us like he loves Jason? It didn't land like a bomb. It was worse than that. It was a slow, sinking weight in my chest, like my heart had been wrapped in wet wool. I dried my hands too quickly, dropping the towel onto the counter. What do you mean, sweetheart? Of course he loves you. Ben tilted his head and shrugged a shoulder. He just doesn't act like it. He sat at the kitchen island, pulling the tablet into his lap. Uncle Jeremy posted pictures from dinner. Jason got to sit next to Grandma. Grandpa was laughing with him about some old toy car, and then he said he was going to let him keep it. It's a classic, he said. He looked down. When I showed Grandpa my clay robot last Christmas, he just said, "That's different." And then he started watching TV. I didn't remember that. Not fully. But I did remember how Grandpa never once asked about Ben's artwork, even when he came running in with paint still on his fingers, proud and breathless. And how, that same night, Jason got a round of applause for reciting 2 lines of a school play. I think maybe he doesn't like robots, Ben offered with a weak smile. Oh, sweetheart, I said, crouching beside him, resting a hand on his knee. Grandpa, sometimes he just has a hard time understanding things that aren't what he's used to. That doesn't mean he doesn't care, but it feels like he doesn't, Ben whispered. He twisted the edge of his sweatshirt between his fingers, something he hadn't done in over a year, back when the kids at his old school teased him for not knowing how to throw a football. That old familiar ache rose in me, the ache of watching your child shrink. And worse, recognizing the echo. I had spent years wondering the same thing in that house, wondering why Jeremy's C+ math test got celebrated with ice cream, while my art award was met with silence. Why my parents told people I was in between things when I had a gallery show downtown. Why every parenting choice I made, every boundary I held, seemed to offend them just by existing. Now Ben was feeling it too, and I had no idea how to shield him from something I still hadn't figured out how to name. We sat in silence for a moment. Then he asked, "Do you think if we invite them for spaghetti night, they'd come?" I blinked, surprised. "You want them to come here?" He nodded. "Maybe they forgot how fun it is when you make the big noodles." He meant the fresh tagliatelle I'd made by hand last month. He'd rolled out the dough with me, face smudged with flour, laughing the whole time. His joy had felt so bright that night, untouched by anything outside this house. Now that light had dimmed, just a little. I pulled him close, wrapping both arms around him, resting my cheek on the top of his head. "They might not come," I said softly, "but we'll still make it special, just us." And maybe that should have been enough, but deep inside, something was growing, not anger. Something quieter and heavier. A rising certainty that this wasn't just about last night's dinner. It was a pattern. A pattern I was done ignoring. I didn't plan it. There was no dramatic decision, no speech rehearsed in the mirror. I just got in the car. The morning after Ben's question, I dropped him off at school, drove 2 blocks toward the grocery store, and then turned the wheel in the opposite direction, toward the edge of town. Toward them. The drive felt longer than it used to. My hands gripped the steering wheel too tight. Every mile marker I passed dug up something buried. Thanksgiving afternoons where my roasted vegetables were met with polite silence. Family photos where I always ended up on the edge, half-cropped or awkwardly angled. The time I brought one of my illustrations to show Dad, and he asked if I ever thought about doing something more stable. I told myself I just needed clarity. A conversation. One honest human explanation. I told myself this was about Ben, but I think part of me already knew. I wasn't going there for answers. I was going for the truth. Their street was the same. Every lawn manicured, every porch draped in matching wreaths. Their house stood right in the middle, white brick, pale blue shutters, tidy as a catalog spread, and cold. I parked at the curb, heart pounding, in that awful, anticipatory rhythm. I hadn't called, I hadn't warned them. I didn't want to give them time to prepare their usual performance. The doorbell chimed. Then, footsteps. My mother opened the door wearing a fleece vest and holding a tea towel in one hand. She froze when she saw me. "Laura," she said, blinking. "Is everything all right?" "No," I said quietly. "I need to talk to you." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "Well, come in, I guess." The house smelled like lemon cleaner and cinnamon, artificial warmth. The TV played softly in the other room. My father sat in his usual armchair, reading glasses on, a mug balanced on the edge of a coaster. He looked up when I entered and stiffened, visibly. "Didn't expect you," he said, setting the mug down. "Is Ben with you?" I shook my head. "He's at school. I came alone." Mom fussed with the tea towel, glancing between us. "Can I get you something? Tea? Or—" "No, thank you," I said. I need to understand something." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She knew what I meant. I turned to my father. "Why weren't we invited?" He looked at me, unreadable. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Then he set his glasses on the table, folded his hands, and said it. "You chose a life we don't approve of." There it was. The sentence landed with such precise cruelty it didn't even sting at first. Just silence, like all the air had been pulled from the room. My mother stepped forward, flustered. "Howard." "No," he said. She asked for honesty. I stared at him. "You mean because I left Matthew? Because I chose to raise Ben alone?" He didn't answer. Because I didn't marry a dentist and move into a 3-bedroom in the cul-de-sac? Still nothing. My voice rose. Because I became an illustrator instead of a paralegal? Because I spend my weekends at markets selling books I write and draw myself instead of, what, baking lemon bars for the church committee? My mother flinched. We just wanted stability for you. I have stability. I have a business. I own my home. Dad sighed. But at what cost? You're always scrambling, always doing things the hard way. I took a step back, shaking my head. You think I chose failure, but what I chose was freedom. He looked away. And finally, I understood. It wasn't about them not understanding me. It was about them not wanting to. They had drawn a line in the sand years ago. And I, unknowingly, had spent a decade trying to prove I was still worthy from the other side. You didn't approve of my choices, I said slowly. So you punished me for them. And now, you're punishing my son. My mother looked like she might cry. That's not what we meant. But it's what you did. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sharp. Clean. It was the sound of something breaking loose. I picked up my bag. I just needed to hear it out loud, that's all. And with that, I walked to the door. I didn't slam it. Didn't storm out. I closed it gently behind me, drove away slow. But inside, something in me was burning to ash. And something else, something stronger, was beginning to take shape in the smoke. I didn't go straight home. I drove past Ben's school, the town library, the bakery, where they know my name, and always slip an extra cookie into his paper bag, just in case. I ended up pulling into the overlook, the one that gives you that wide, quiet view of the river bend and the hills rolling soft in the distance. And I just sat. The car ticked as it cooled, and the silence inside was thick. But it didn't press in on me the way it used to. It just sat there too, like it was waiting. My fingers found the little pendant on my necklace, the one Ben gave me last Mother's Day, made of clay and paint and far too much glue. It read, in his crooked handwriting, "You are my favorite human." I held it, breathed, and let the memories come. The first time I brought home a sketchbook instead of a textbook. I was 16, and I'd used my babysitting money to buy it without asking. When my mother saw the receipt, she said nothing, just slid it into the trash with the junk mail. The day I turned down Michael Halperin's proposal, he was kind and polite, with an orthodontist's salary and a golden retriever named Stanley. Everyone said I was a fool not to say yes. I'd smiled at the ring box and said gently, "You're wonderful. But you don't see me." When I told my parents, my mother didn't look up from her crossword. "Well," she muttered, "your standards were always a little high." And then there was the night I held Ben for the first time. Alone in a quiet hospital room, under the low hum of fluorescent lights. He was so small, so fierce in his crying. The nurse had offered to call someone for me. I said no. I was enough. I had to be. And I was. I didn't just survive. I built something. My own studio in the sunroom of our little rental house. A client list that started with small commissions and grew into full children's books. Workshops at local schools, library readings, a website that finally started generating sales that paid more than just grocery money. I'd been rejected by publishers, ghosted by agents, dismissed at family gatherings like I was just Laura the hobbyist. But that hobby had paid our heating bill last winter. That hobby had bought Ben's braces. That hobby was now a small LLC with a tax ID number and a bank account in my name. And still, in their eyes, I was the cautionary tale. Too artsy, too emotional, too loud, too much. I'd spent years absorbing that message in 1,000 subtle ways. At birthday dinners, where the questions were about Jeremy's new consulting firm and Erica's Pilates certification, while mine, if asked at all, were framed as curiosities. Still doing your drawings, like I was 12, like this wasn't my life. But it was my life, and I was done treating it like a compromise. Because here's the truth. I didn't pick the easiest path. I picked mine, and no one ever got to take that from me, not even the people who gave me my name. I glanced down at my phone. A missed call from my mom. No voicemail. Just her name on the screen, waiting. I didn't call back. Instead, I took a photo of the view, golden light touching the river like it knew a secret. I'd use it later for a new piece I'd been sketching in my mind since last week. A single woman and her child on a hilltop, looking ahead, not back. When I finally pulled into our driveway, the porch light flicked on automatically, bathing the front door in soft amber. Home. Ben's sneakers were already by the door. I stepped inside, and he ran to greet me, arms open wide. "Where'd you go, Mama?" "Just for a drive," I said, kissing the top of his head. Had to clear my thoughts. He pulled me toward the kitchen. "Can we make pancakes for dinner?" "Absolutely," I said, smiling. "Let's make them with chocolate chips and bananas." Fancy. And just like that, the ache loosened. Not gone, but no longer steering the car. I stirred batter while Ben set the table with mismatched napkins and too many forks. We laughed. Ate too much. Read 3 chapters of The Last Space Fox before bed. And when he was asleep, curled around his stuffed bear like a crescent moon, I went into my studio and opened a blank page. Then I started to draw. Not for them, not to prove anything, just for me. It took me 3 days to pick up the phone. Not out of anger. Something else. Something slower. I think I needed time to make sure the clarity I felt on that hilltop wasn't just adrenaline or spite. I needed to know I was ready to hear them and be heard. So when I finally did call, I kept my voice calm. "Can we talk?" I asked. Not over the phone. Not in passing. Not about dinner or weather or Ben's school project. A real talk. To my surprise, they agreed. They didn't ask questions. They didn't ask what it was about. Just said yes. We met at their house again. No holiday this time. No centerpiece on the dining table. Just coffee, 2 mugs, and my mother's hands fidgeting with the hem of her cardigan. Dad stayed mostly quiet at first. He was never one for emotional unpacking. But Mom, she looked at me like she wanted to say something, but couldn't figure out where to begin. So I helped her. "I don't want to fight," I said softly. "I'm not here to get an apology. I just want to stop pretending everything's fine when it's not." She blinked. "You think we're pretending?" "I know we are." She nodded slowly, like that hurt a little, but also made sense. "I felt like I was being erased," I continued. "Not just last week. For years. Little by little." The word erased seemed to hit her hard. I saw her swallow. Then finally, she said it. "We were scared." Her voice was almost too quiet to hear. I looked at her, surprised. "We were scared for you," she repeated, eyes suddenly wet. "You left everything we thought was safe. A husband, a stable job. You were raising a child alone, chasing something we didn't understand. And we didn't know how to love that." I didn't speak. I wanted her to keep going. "So instead of asking how to support you," she said, "we judged. We clung to what made sense to us. Marriage, schedules, titles, because that's what we knew. And when you stepped outside of it, it felt like we were losing you." "You did lose me," I said gently, "not because I left, but because you stopped seeing me when I did." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks now. Not loud sobs, just a quiet unraveling. "I didn't know how to love you without trying to fix you," she said, "and that was never fair." I reached across the table, and she took my hand. Her skin was cool, soft, familiar, and foreign, all at once. Dad cleared his throat. "We didn't talk about feelings when I was growing up," he said, not quite looking at me. "It's no excuse. But I honestly thought if you got tired of struggling, you'd come around, settle into something easier." I looked at him. "Struggling doesn't mean failing, Dad." He nodded, but I don't know if he fully understood. Not yet. Still, The fact that he stayed seated, that he didn't check his watch or shift the conversation to sports, was something. We sat there in the quiet for a while, the kind that used to feel heavy but now felt open. "I didn't come today to fix us," I said eventually. "I don't know if we can." Mom squeezed my hand. "But maybe we can start?" I nodded. "That's all I want." She looked down at our joined hands. "We missed a lot of years," she said softly. "Maybe," I said, "but Ben hasn't." That got her attention. She smiled through her tears. "I'd like to know him better." I smiled back. He'd like that, too. And just like that, the door cracked open. Not wide, but enough to let the light in. A week later, I walked into my parents' house, holding a cardboard box labeled "Fragile" in thick black marker. Ben was trailing behind me, proudly carrying a smaller box with both hands like it held gold. Mom opened the door before I even knocked. "Oh, good," she said, stepping aside with a smile that was still a little nervous around the edges. "You brought things?" I nodded. "Some of my work. I thought maybe you'd like to see what I've actually been doing all these years." She hesitated. Then she surprised me. "I'd love to." We set up at the dining table, same one that had once hosted birthdays, Sunday pot roasts, and years of tension so thick you could slice it. Now, it was just wood, neutral, waiting. From the box, I pulled out the picture books first, the ones that had my name on the cover, the ones with colorful spines and cracked corners from library shelves and preschool cubbies. Ben hovered proudly over my shoulder. "This one's about a dragon who has stage fright," he said, holding up Darla the Brave. "It's my favorite. She kind of reminds me of Mom." I smiled, then handed the book to my father. He opened it carefully, flipping through the pages with a seriousness that almost made me laugh. He stopped on a spread where Darla hides under a table while the other dragons roar on stage. His eyes lingered. I didn't say a word. From the second box came the framed prints. Illustrations I'd done for independent authors, nonprofits, a couple of poetry chapbooks. Some were bold and colorful, some soft and intricate. All mine. Mom touched the edge of a piece featuring a mother and child curled up under a tree. The detail in the leaves was something I'd labored over for weeks. "This is beautiful," she said quietly. "You really made this?" I nodded. She traced one of the branches with her finger, almost like she was trying to feel the time it had taken. Then I pulled out my laptop. "I also do readings," I said. "School visits, workshops, community centers, mostly for kids who don't always get a lot of books at home." I opened a video and turned the screen toward them. It was from a literacy event at the library. Me standing in front of a group of wide-eyed first graders, reading aloud while holding one of my books, doing the voices, making them laugh. Ben giggled at the part where I gave the duck a French accent. I snuck a glance at my parents. Mom had her hand over her mouth, her eyes glued to the screen. Dad wasn't blinking much, and for once, he wasn't trying to rush to a conclusion. He was just watching. When the video ended, I closed the laptop and looked up. "I never wanted you to clap," I said, breaking the silence, "or throw me a parade. I just wanted to share." They didn't speak right away. Then my father leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "I didn't know," he said. His voice was rougher than usual. "I thought you were doing sketches, posters for local things. I didn't realize you were running something, that you built this." Mom reached out and touched my arm. "You've built a life," she said. "One with purpose, one that helps people. I see that now." I didn't say thank you. It didn't feel like that kind of moment, but I nodded. Because that was enough. Not a breakthrough, not absolution, just something honest. After a while, Ben tugged at Mom's sleeve. "Grandma, do you want to read Darla with me? I can do the dragon voice." Her face lit up. "I'd love that." She settled next to him on the couch, and he opened the book across their laps. I stayed at the table, watching them, my hands resting on the now empty box. For years, I'd kept this part of myself tucked away like a secret. Not because I was ashamed, but because I'd grown tired of defending it. Now, for the first time, I wasn't defending anything. I was just letting them see. No more performance. No more proving. Just me. We stayed longer than I expected. Ben and my mother were still giggling on the couch over Darla the Brave. Her dragon voice was strangely impressive, while I quietly packed up the prints and books. I moved slowly, not wanting to break the calm. The sun had dipped low by the time I carried the box to the door. I was just slipping my coat over my shoulders when I heard Dad clear his throat behind me. "Laura," he said, voice low. "Wait a moment." I turned. He was standing by the hallway cabinet, the one that hadn't moved an inch since I was a kid. A dusty paperweight still sat on top, the glass globe with the red ribbon floating inside. I'd always thought it looked like a tiny trapped flame. He opened the cabinet drawer and pulled something out. It was wrapped in soft cloth, worn thin with age. He walked over, unwrapping it slowly, like whatever was inside mattered. Then he held it out to me. A photo frame, wooden, a little scuffed around the corners. Inside was a picture I hadn't seen in decades. Me, about 10 years old, sitting cross-legged on the back patio, a sketchbook in my lap, barefoot, elbows smudged with charcoal. My hair was wild and half pulled into a crooked ponytail. I was bent over a page, completely lost in it. It wasn't posed. I hadn't even known anyone was watching. For a second, I didn't speak. "I took that," he said, clearing his throat again. "You were always out there drawing something. I remember thinking you looked like you belonged to another world entirely." I looked up at him, trying to read his face. He didn't smile, but he didn't look away. "I kept it in my desk," he said, "all these years." My fingers curled around the frame like it was something fragile. "I didn't know," I whispered. "I know," he said, and I never liked the silence between us. That was it. Just that. Not an apology, not a flood of emotion, but something real, something my father had maybe never said to anyone. I didn't cry, but I felt it, right in the center of my chest, where the longing had always lived. "I always thought you disapproved," I said softly. "I did," he admitted. "For a long time. I thought it would be harder. I didn't want to see you struggle." "I wasn't asking for protection," I said. "Just support." He nodded. I didn't know the difference then. We stood there for a moment, two people who had misunderstood each other for years, trying now to meet somewhere closer to the middle. "I'm sorry it took me this long," he said, voice quieter, "but I hope it's not too late to start doing better." I looked down at the photo again. 10-year-old me, too focused to notice a camera, too unguarded to pretend. "It's not too late," I said. His shoulders relaxed just a little. "I'll walk you out," he said. We stepped onto the porch, the late evening air crisp and clean. He stood beside me as I loaded the box into the trunk. Before I got into the car, he reached into his pocket. "There's a fall arts festival coming up, right?" he asked. "I saw it in the paper." "Yeah," I said, surprised. "I have a booth this year." He handed me a folded page, cut from the Town Gazette. My name was circled in ink. Beneath it, the listing for a panel I was leading. "Telling Stories Through Images, Author Talk with Laura McKinley." "I'd like to come," he said. My hand tightened around the paper. "I'd like that," I said, and I meant it. He nodded once, then headed back inside. I sat in the car for a moment, the photo frame resting in the passenger seat. It was scratched, simple. The glass was a little foggy around the edges, but it held proof. Proof that once, he saw me. And maybe, just maybe, he still could. The mailbox was stuffed, like always. Flyers, catalogs, a crumpled envelope from Ben's school announcing yet another fundraiser. I pulled everything out with one hand while balancing a grocery bag on my hip, already planning dinner in my head. Something quick, eggs maybe, or frozen pizza if I caved. It wasn't until I got inside, groceries on the counter and my coat still half on, that I noticed the cream-colored envelope tucked between the pizza coupons. My full name was written in cursive across the front, No return address, no printed label, just my mother's handwriting, neat, careful, unmistakable. I stared at it for a second, unsure why my chest tightened the way it did. It was just a letter. Still, I sat down before opening it. Inside was a folded page, thick paper, faintly scented, like the drawer where Mom keeps her scarves. It wasn't long. Just a few lines in her script, each word steady. Laura, we've spent too many holidays pretending distance didn't hurt. This time, no excuses. We want you and Ben with us for Thanksgiving. Come hungry. Come as you are. Love. Mom and Dad. That was it. No guilt trip. No agenda. Just a door cracked open. On purpose. I read it again. Slower this time. Come as you are. Not come when you're ready to blend in. Not bring a casserole and your best behavior. Just you. It was absurd how something so small could feel so enormous. I set the letter down on the counter and just looked at it for a while, like it might vanish if I blinked. Later, when Ben got home and kicked off his shoes in that dramatic, chaotic way only kids can, I waved the letter in the air like a flag. Guess what? I said. We've been officially invited to Thanksgiving. His eyes lit up. Really? With Grandma's weird marshmallow yams? I laughed. Yes, even those. Are we going? He asked, climbing onto a kitchen stool. Like for real going? I hesitated. Because saying yes meant walking back into a place that once shut us out. But it also meant something more. It meant not waiting for a perfect apology, not demanding a parade. Just showing up and giving this, whatever it was, a chance to become something better. Yeah, I said finally, we are. Ben pumped his fist like we'd just won something. Can I make my spaceship cookies? You have to, I said, smiling. It's tradition now. He ran off to find his recipe binder, and I stood there with the letter still open on the counter, the grocery bag half unpacked. Something inside me, some old cold part, was softening, not melting completely, but warming slowly. Because when you've gone years being the afterthought, the outsider, the black sheep, even the smallest welcome can feel like a light left on just for you. I folded the letter neatly and tucked it under a magnet on the fridge, next to one of Ben's clay robots. And for the first time in a very long time, I started to imagine what it might feel like to walk into that house, not as the disappointment, but as a daughter. I stood in the kitchen, keys in hand, staring at the front door like it might change its mind. Ben was already zipped into his jacket, spaceship cookies packed carefully into a tin he insisted on decorating with stickers last night. He buzzed with excitement, bouncing on the heels of his sneakers. "Are you nervous?" he asked suddenly, tilting his head. I smiled, a little. Maybe a little. "Me too," he whispered, and slipped his hand into mine. "Let's just go together." So we did. The drive was quiet. I kept the radio low, the tin of cookies nestled between our seats, like a peace offering. As we turned onto my parents' street, a wave of memory swept through me. Familiar sidewalks, porch lights glowing, the scent of November in the air, cold, damp leaves and chimney smoke. The house looked the same. But I didn't. This time, I wasn't walking in as someone seeking approval. I was walking in as someone who had nothing left to prove. We reached the front step, and before I could knock, the door opened. My mother stood there in an apron dusted with flour. "You made it," she said, a little breathless. Come in, come in. The turkey's resting, and your father won't stop picking at the pie crust." She opened the door wider. Inside, the house buzzed with warmth, real warmth, not the brittle kind that once demanded you shrink to fit inside it. Candles flickered, laughter trickled from the dining room, and for the first time, the table was extended, set for more than just tradition. It was set for us. Ben slipped off his coat and darted toward the kitchen to deliver the cookies himself. I hung back in the entryway for a second, and that's when I felt it. A hand, resting gently on my shoulder. I turned. My father stood there, eyes softer than I remembered. He didn't speak at first, just looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "We weren't good at this. Not with you, not with difference." He glanced toward the living room, where Ben was already making everyone laugh with his impressions. "I didn't know how to be a father to someone I didn't understand," he said, "but I want to try being a grandfather to someone I admire." I didn't answer. I couldn't, not with words. So I simply nodded, and when he wrapped an arm around my shoulder, stiff and tentative, I let him. Later, at the table, my mother raised a toast. It wasn't elaborate. It wasn't rehearsed. She looked at Ben, then at me. "I didn't always know how to be a good mother," she said quietly, "but maybe I still have time to be a better grandmother." Everyone fell quiet. Ben beamed. I smiled, deep, surprised, grateful. It wasn't perfection. It was something better. It was a beginning.